Rothschild Island is 39 kilometers of black rock and ice, standing off the northwest shoulder of Alexander Island in one of the emptiest corners of the Antarctic Peninsula. Its spine, the Desco Mountains, climbs to roughly 1,000 meters. The highest point carries a name someone chose with care. They called it Enigma Peak. I want to start with a small dull fact, because the dull facts are where this begins. On most of the charts that matter, this island has a birthday, a discoverer, and a clean lineage. It was sighted, it was named, it was surveyed, it was confirmed. That is the story. It is a tidy story, and almost all of it is true. The consensus runs like this. A Russian expedition under Fabian von Bellingshausen passed through these waters early in the 19th century and saw distant peaks. Nearly 100 years later, a French expedition charted the land properly and gave it a name. Later expeditions refined the map. Each generation added detail. Knowledge accumulated the way it is supposed to, and you should understand why that account is so easy to accept. Antarctic mapping is genuinely incremental. Nobody sees the whole coast at once. A ship glimpses a headland through fog. An aircraft photographs a ridge from 10,000 feet. A sledging party walks a glacier and fills in one more blank. The map thickens slowly, honestly, over decades, so the official version is not a lie. It is the ordinary, unglamorous truth of how remote places enter human knowledge. There is no reason to distrust it, and for a long time I did not. What made me look twice was not a hidden document or a suppressed record. It was the island's own status, written plainly on the charts, refusing to stay put. Here is the first thing that does not sit flat. Edward Alphonse James de Rothschild, the man the island is named for, was a Paris banker born in 1868, head of the French branch of the family and president of de Rothschild Frères. He never went to Antarctica, he never saw the island. It was named for him, in his absence, by a man who barely saw it either. That man was Jean-Baptiste Charcot, who led the French Antarctic expedition of 1908 to 1910. In January 1909, his party roughly charted the feature as an island and wrote onto their map the words Île E de Rothschild, roughly charted, from a distance, in a season when the light off the ice can fuse three separate mountains into one grey wall, or split one into three, which returns me to Bellingshausen, and to a discrepancy I cannot make disappear. The authoritative gazetteer of the British Antarctic Territory records the first sighting in January 1821, from a peak later named Migny after one of his ships. Yet other reputable sources place that first sighting in 1825, 4 years adrift, and describe him seeing 3 peaks. 4 years is not a rounding error. Somewhere in the transcription of this island's origin, a date slipped and nobody has reconciled it, because on a place this remote there is nothing to reconcile it against. There is no logbook entry that everyone agrees on, no landing, no photograph from 1821 or 1825. There is only the fact of 3 peaks seen once, from far away. Sit with that image for a moment. The first human record of this place is a count of peaks, glimpsed across open water by a Russian navigator 2 centuries ago, and even the year is contested. Everything the maps later said with such confidence grew from that single uncertain sighting. The foundation was a guess, and the guess was never checked. Now watch what the island does next, because this is where it stops behaving. In December 1929, the aviator Hubert Wilkins flew over the region and saw it from the air. A few years later, the British Graham Land expedition arrived. one of the last privately funded ventures of its kind, led by the Australian John Rymill, and it looked at the same land and reached a different verdict. The British expedition saw the feature from the air twice, on the 15th of August 1936 and again on the 1st of February 1937, and they concluded that it was not an island at all. It was a mountain, they decided, joined to Alexander Island. In their published account, they gave it a new name to match its new nature. They called it Mount Rothschild. Read that again slowly. An island charted and named in 1909 was demoted in 1937 to a mountain fused onto its larger neighbour. The water that Charcot's French party had recorded between the two landmasses was, according to the British survey, simply not there. One expedition saw a strait, the next saw solid ground. Both were looking at the same place. I have tried hard to make this ordinary, and to a point it is. Aerial reconnaissance in the 1930s was brutal work. You photographed a coastline through cloud from an open cockpit, freezing, with the horizon tilting. And you interpreted shadow as slope and slope as connection. Ice shelves bridge channels and hide them. Mistaking a strait for solid land is an easy human error, but then the island moves again. In November 1940, the United States Antarctic Service expedition flew the same coast, photographed it, roughly mapped it, and reasserted that it was an island after all. They reported discovering a strait separating it from Alexander Island. The water was back. The island Charcot had drawn, and the British had erased, returned the map under American hands. So within 4 years, the same piece of the Earth's surface was an island, then a mountain, then an island again, depending entirely on who was flying over it and in what season. And I want to be careful here because it would be easy to make this sound sinister when it is really something quieter and, in a way, worse. Nobody was hiding the strait. They simply could not tell if it was there. That is the part that unsettles me more than any locked archive would. This is not a story about a truth being concealed. It is a story about a place so far from human reach that its most basic property, whether it is one thing or two, could not be fixed for decades and swung back and forth with each new set of eyes. The island did not hide. It genuinely could not be pinned down, and the naming followed the confusion faithfully. Île E de Rothschild on the French chart, E. Rothschild Island on a British Admiralty chart of 1914, E. Rothschild Øya on a Norwegian chart of 1927, then Mount Rothschild in the British account of 1938, then Cape Rothschild on a United States hydrographic chart of 1940. One feature, 5 names, each carrying a different theory of what it was. Think about what a name is supposed to do. A name fixes a thing in place so that the next person can find it. But here the names did not fix anything. Each one recorded a passing opinion about the island's shape, and then hardened into authority, so that later mapmakers inherited not just a label but an argument, and often could not tell which they were copying. This is the mechanism I keep circling, and it needs no conspiracy to work. Charts are made from charts. When a surveyor cannot verify a coastline himself, he defers to the most authoritative prior map, and that map defers to the one before it. An early guess does not get tested. It gets inherited and reprinted and slowly mistaken for a measurement. So you do not need anyone to coordinate a silence. The institutions were rivals as much as colleagues. French, British, Norwegian, American surveys, competing for territory and prestige across the same ice. And yet an error or an uncertainty could propagate through all of them. not because they agreed to repeat it, but because each had the same reason to trust the chart in front of them. That is the closest thing to a cover-up here, and it is not one. It is the ordinary physics of how knowledge travels when the thing being known is unreachable. The uncertainty organized itself. No one decided that Rothschild Island would stay unsettled for a century. The distance decided it, and the fog, and the simple economics of who could afford to fly there twice. Let me be fair to the map makers, because I owe them that. The detailed mapping did eventually come. Air photographs from the Ron Antarctic Research Expedition of 1947 and 1948 filled in the shape. A surveyor named Searle of the Falkland Islands Dependency Survey worked on it in 1960. United States satellite imagery in 1974 finally looked down from orbit. The island, we can say now, is an island, so the honest skeptic in me wants to close the case there. The wobble between 1909 and 1940 was a data problem, and better data resolved it. Satellites do not mistake a strait for a mountain. The modern map is correct, the old confusion is explained, and the story of Rothschild Island is, in the end, a story about instruments getting better. That is the reasonable conclusion, but I keep returning to one sentence in the record, and I cannot get past it. Even now, the reference works note that the geological relationship between Rothschild Island and Alexander Island has never actually been proven. The two may share a common structure beneath the ice. It might, geologically, still be part of Alexander Island. It has simply never been surveyed on the ground to find out. Read that carefully, because it is doing something strange. The satellites settled the surface question. There is water between the two landmasses. It is an island in the sense that a ship could sail around it. But underneath, in the rock, the old British verdict of 1937 has never been disproven either. Beneath the ice, the question of whether it is one thing or two is still open. So the island did not stop being ambiguous. The ambiguity just descended. It moved from the coastline where satellites could reach it, down into the geology where nobody has yet walked. The peak the surveyors named Enigma still stands over a body of land whose fundamental nature, whole or joined, remains exactly as unresolved as it was when Charcot's men squinted at it in 1909. And that is what will not let me put this down. We tend to believe that with enough technology, every question about the physical world eventually closes. Rothschild Island quietly refuses that belief. It has been photographed from the air and from space, mapped and remapped, named 5 times, argued over for 170 years, and its most basic question has simply moved somewhere we still cannot go. I have gone looking for the moment the mystery ends, the clean confirmation, the ground party that walked the strait and touched the rock on both sides and settled it forever. As far as the record shows, that party never came. The island was decided from the air and from orbit, always from above, never from underfoot. It has never once been known the way you know a thing you have stood on, which leaves me with a smaller, colder thought than any conspiracy. We assume the map is finished. We assume that the places with names are the places we understand. But a name, I have learnt from this island, can be a lid set over an open question, and the fact that a thing has been labelled for 2 centuries tells you nothing about whether anyone has ever truly seen it. There are other features on the Antarctic charts named the same way, from the air, from a distance, on the authority of a single passing glance, and never confirmed from the ground. I did not go looking for them at first. But once you have watched one island flicker between existing and not existing, you start to wonder how many other names on the map are covering the same silence. I do not know how many. That is the honest end of it. Somewhere off the northwest shoulder of Alexander Island, a black ridge of rock rises out of the ice, and we have called it Rothschild after a banker who never saw it, and its highest point enigma after the thing it has always been. The name was more accurate than anyone intended, and the door it opens onto has not been closed.